right, this recording is all about the FBI's use of an undercover employee, or what I would call an undercover agent, in an attempt to uncover information that ultimately would allow them to get the search and seizure, as well as, I think their ultimate goal obviously was to get an indictment. So the purpose of this recording, I would say it serves really two purposes. The first, and to me one of the more important elements of it, has to do with the affidavit. And this document, again, is the document that enabled the government to come in and do a search and seizure. In paragraph 27, or page 6 of this document, Special Agent Harding, he makes the claim that outside of the foregoing, and really those foregoing statements were statements made by VisionQuest staff members, which I think after, well, depends on where you're at listening to these videos, but I've already proven that there's a great deal of inaccuracy, a great deal of bias, and specifically lies and perjury created by Steve Laska and Stacey Bean. And that outside of those elements, David Harding basically says the government has evidence that Steve Peters, myself, was continuing to market and promote VisionQuest Capital and promissory notes investments to new investors. And his proof is in this FBI undercover employee that they sent out to meet with me. Furthermore, they state that I guaranteed this investment of 8% return to this undercover agent when we met. And all of what I just articulated to you is a complete and utter lie. I've listened to the recordings. There are 3 meetings in which I met with this undercover employee. One was on May 19th, another one was on May 30th, and the last one was on July 7th. And I am going to use this video to expose the lies that are within inside the affidavit. Now, interesting, the second reason, I said there was 2, for this recording is that, and this is kind of a byproduct that I was not expecting, but I truly believe that what you will hear in these 3 recordings with the undercover agent is that I carried out my fiduciary duties. One of the biggest issues, as it was kind of referenced early on by Wes, is, this case is really about disclosure. And what did Peter say or not say to investors, and how can we prove it? Now, although these 3 recordings don't demonstrate Peter's taking the undercover agent through the entire VisionQuest wealth management process, which we call the value-based wealth management system, and we can't conclude that what Peters talks about with this undercover agent is what he does with every single one of the clients that he meets with. Even though those things are accurate, I think that the context of these 3 recordings early on in the process with clients certainly demonstrates my fiduciary duty. And it is, in my opinion, that when you listen to these recordings, these 3 recordings that took place over really about a 45-day period, that I took the steps early on in this sales process with this client to demonstrate that I was exercising reasonable diligence and care. I was really trying to take the time to understand who she was, what her goals were, what success looked like in her eyes, so that when it came time to render advice, that I would be rendering advice that was in her best interest. And to me, I believe that this is the process that I historically followed. And I had already outlined this to you, Wes, and Caitlin, when I sent off those documents around fiduciary duty and really the value-based wealth management system that VisionQuest utilized and how it followed, which I felt that I did a great job of following it, that it does hold to the fiduciary duties of an advisor. And the only time I really talk about VisionQuest Capital is in the May 30th, 2017 conversation. This was an in-person meeting that took place at the Capitol Grill. And at this meeting, I did discuss that I own a company called Vision Quest Capital. And what I think is crazy is I even told her that currently right now I'm faced with some compliance issues, and that I believed over time that there was a good possibility that I may be forced into changing the structure, particularly the ownership structure of these two companies. So in essence, and in layman's terms, what I'm doing is I'm actually discussing fiduciary reform at a high level. And I'm disclosing this, that we're currently right now in an uncertain environment and probably will be for the foreseeable future. And I just want the SEC to tell us what we need to do. So for a framework of this video, in an attempt to keep this video to under an hour, we are going to focus our attention solely on the three recordings that took place with the undercover agent and myself on May 19th, 2017, May 30th, 2017, which was an in-person meeting at Capitol Grill, and then also July 7th, 2017. From the very beginning, Kim is a bit pushy. Obviously now, knowing that she's another undercover agent, I understand why. But literally, I mean, within 15 seconds of the conversation that we have, she breaks into, can you give me a better understanding of what products you sell and what I can provide to her? So here, take a listen.
I'm doing well.
I'm sorry about that. I was just trying to get to my car. Thank you for taking my call and setting this up for me. I just wanted to get, I'm trying to find a place to transfer some of my money to, and I just wanted to I'm relocating to the area within the next 6 months, and just interested in what types of financial products you had and what you sort of offered.
Okay. Well, you live in Louisiana right now?
Right now I'm in New York. My cell phone is the Louisiana number, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, because I saw the Louisiana number. So,
yeah.
What are you looking for? What are you looking for in the way of an advisor? I mean, can you tell me what you're kind of looking for?
Yeah, I have a strange situation. And I just ended a long-term relationship that was not a legal, it was not a divorce. It was sort of a common law relationship, but, and received I guess you'd call it sort of a settlement. So I want to transfer that money out of, where it's held right now, and I'm looking for stuff that I can, both long-term and short-term. I would love to be able to have some type of investment where I could, there could be some type of dividends or income or something like that in part of it, and then the rest sort of a longer-term situation. I'm, in my early 40s, so I'm sort of resetting, I guess you'd call it, without going into details, but, and that's where I am. So if I sound a little frenetic, that's what's going on. So.
Now, you hear Kim and you hear how she starts off, and I listen, but I guess you could say that I diplomatically push back, and the approach that I take with Kim is to tell her more about how we work, what we do, and even you're going to hear how we charge.
I'll tell you a little bit about our company first, and then I'll tell you some things that I think that, for me to be able to tell you whether or not it's a good fit, I
Sure.
need to know a little bit more information, too, as well.
Yep.
I worked for a publicly traded company for a number of years called SCI Investments out of Philadelphia. In 2005, I launched my company called Vision Quest Wealth Management that was focused on wealthy families, and the role that I played was one of personal CFO. That was kind of how I branded ourselves, and I would tell you that one of my clients really helped me with that. In the industry, it's the model that I kind of replicate's more of a family office type of model. But what I nobody really knows what a family office is. So I
know exactly what a family office is.
Okay, good. So that's basically I created this model because it's kind of I felt the clientele that I wanted to serve was kind of a one-stop shop type of environment. So unlike what you were just describing, like where you're like, what product do you sell to a certain extent? That's not really kind of how we work, because I really don't sit here and try to sell a particular product. I try to understand what the client's trying to accomplish, because I believe that there's multiple ways for how they can accomplish the goal. The other aspect of it is I try not to just be an investment guy. Like, I mean, there's plenty of good investment people, and if you're just looking for investments, I certainly can, go down that path with you. But because of the model that I've created, I try to look at it in the context of, like, I don't know how people manage their investments without, like, the example you're talking about, I'm assuming that maybe the amount of money that's coming is in the form of non-qualified money. So I don't know how you would manage that money without looking at the tax ramifications of it, right? I mean, it's not just purely investing. It's about looking at the total financial picture and what's entailed to that. So, so my viewpoint on it is that, what we're really trying to do for families is create something I call financial wellness. And it's really about something that most of the time people don't articulate. People normally come to you when you have a problem, like you. I mean, right now, your problem's different, but most times when people are looking to make a change, it's because something is going on in their life, whether or not positive or negative, and they're trying to figure out how they cope with that change. And but the root of it really is balance. What they're trying to do is money is nothing more than an enabler to your life. So what they're really looking for is to create some kind of balance between how their money is going to be utilized to impact the life side of things. And and so that's kind of the art form in which we play in. How we charge, which I think is probably a better question than what kind of products we use, is that we can charge clients a retainer fee up front, which has been my historic model, which is like, here's what I look at your total situation and what you're trying to accomplish, and we spend some time together, and I basically say, for me to take you on as a client, here's a retainer fee. If we manage money, it really depends on how much money we're talking about, but we can range anywhere from 1.5% on the high end to, on the low end, probably 70, 80 basis points, but it really depends on the account size of the individual. What's the amount of money that we're really managing.
From there, what I do is I take her through our company and its size and its makeup and its culture and its location, and even, candidly, a little bit of the challenges that we're faced with. And so I know a lot of the discovery that I heard was that Peters is this bragger, and he talks all the time, and he promotes and makes things bigger than what they are. But, well, why don't you take a listen?
I got a good amount all over. We have an office in Charlotte, we have an office in Richmond, and we have an office in Raleigh. I'm headquartered in Raleigh, and but we're not a very big firm. I mean, in fact, I'm trying to scale down the firm a little bit, because I feel as if I know this sounds funny, but we've been doing a lot of acquisitions over the last probably 2 or 3 years in different locations. And when you do that, it's great because you get good growth, but the part that you struggle a little bit with is some of the clientele that you've taken on through acquisition isn't necessarily clientele that you really, really want to have.
Sure.
And so
you have to take the good with the bad, right?
Yeah, and I've learned that not all revenue is good revenue.
From there, what I think is interesting in this next reporting clip is that Kim actually demonstrates her knowledge of the industry, and she starts to demonstrate to me a certain level of sophistication, and she starts to articulate, based upon some of the things that I've told her, what she's looking for. So take a listen.
You're also making aggressive investments for them on their behalf. You're also maybe doing some, you're trying to balance their whole life for, legacies and such. And I understand, and I'm looking at what I'm dealing with now. I'm trying to find. I'd love to find a place where there's a little bit more personal service. I was with a private client service of a major commercial investment bank for a number of years, and I'm trying to pull back from that a little bit and work with somebody that can, sort of understand my situation. As it's not your typical situation. It's not like I have, I'm just kind of rejiggering my finances. It's now I have to figure out what to do with, this amount that I have, and how to, is there a part of that I could actually, live off of in a sense, that could remain fairly liquid, or is there, and what part can grow, and I'm looking at the big picture now from all different angles, and wanted to find, a couple places that I could talk to that could potentially give me that more personal service, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. When you look for personal services, though, what are you really looking for? Is it just the investments, or is it really the whole financial picture for you?
Well, for the beginning, it's probably the investments, but overall, yes, the overall financial picture. Okay. I'm concerned initially with putting the sort of, I would not call this a windfall, but I have a sum of I have some funds now that are very liquid, that I need to put someplace, not an account, and be able to see if I can grow that independent of, my salary and the 401k that I've amassed. And I want to be able to take this and be able to sort of do something positive with it. But yes, I would also want to factor everything else into the bigger picture. So I guess I didn't really answer your question because I'm answering it as both.
At this stage, because I'm really just trying to understand who she is and what her goals are, Kim does what a lot of clients do. They want me to know how wealthy they really are and what kind of money we're talking about. So at this stage, and it's just a brief section of the recording, she tells me the amount of money that we're working with here.
Used to dealing with, it's a low 7-figure amount that I have now, sort of.
So this next clip is really a point in the conversation where I start to talk about, or really start to ask her more about what she wants to do, and she starts to give me some of that information. But what I'm trying to really feel out and have conversations with her about is whether or not her goals are realistic. So take a listen.
I could be able to generate, money begets money, right? So I want to be able to see if I could work with somebody that could introduce me to ways that I could, grow that independent of, like I said, my career outlook and all that other kind of stuff. Okay. So I want to be careful with it. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, please. I'm sorry. I may interrupt you.
No, that was it.
Okay. What I was going to ask is, do you see it as something where you want the money to produce a certain level of income on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis for you, or are you really just trying to grow it for capital appreciation, or a combination of both? I mean, and if it's a combination of both, have you kind of started to work out a map of what you need this money to produce an income for you to supplement your salary?
I'd say it's a combination of both. I haven't really, I've thrown a couple things together on paper, but I'm not, I'm not sure that my math is exactly right. But if there was some portion of that could generate some type of income, like, quarterly dividends or something like that, where there's actual cash being generated, that would be a big plus. But I also want to keep a portion of that into maybe more conservative things that could just grow over time, over the next 10 to 20 years. I guess I'd like to have some of that be accessible, and I don't know that I would say I could live off of I could just live off of that, because that's unrealistic. But I'd definitely like to be able to realize some of that I guess money as from on a regular basis, I guess. Does that make any sense, or am I completely unrealistic?
It does. I think, though, that when I think about it, it's like you're trying to understand what you want to supplement. So I think that, when you're looking for something that's income producing, it'd be different. I mean, in a perfect world, like how kind of institutions work, when you're looking at money, you sit there and you're like, they're looking at a time horizon that's very long and 20 years out, stuff like that. Human beings don't behave that way. They behave on, and they've even trained that way, quarterly or annually. What have you done for me lately? Kind of mindset, where institutions don't necessarily play that way. So, what you're trying to do in my role is try to understand, what does success look like in your eyes. And so the way you do that is by understanding more about what that money can accomplish for you. So as I listen to it, it's like, yes, you want to do both, or produce income, and it produces, capital appreciation. Let's just say it's $1 million. If you turned to me and said, Steve, I want to make $100,000 off of that in income every year, how do I go about doing it? I would sit here and tell you that, in essence, you're looking, and by the way, I want to be conservative about it. And you're basically telling me I want to create 10% return, annualized return of income off of it through dividends and some form of income. And I would tell you, and I want it to be conservative in an interest rate world that we're in right now. I would turn to you and say, well, that's going to be challenging to happen to keep it incredibly conservative, right? Because you're going to have some risk on the table to accomplish the goal that you want. And we can talk about what those risks look like, and we can make educated decisions on them, but there will be certainly risk involved. What is my risk of losing 10% in any given year? Possible, right?
Sure.
Is it what happens if I, what other risk do I have? Well, you have the risk of not accomplishing $100,000 of income a year because you're not willing to take on those risks, right? Because at the end of the day, you're more conservative than it, so you're not going to accomplish the goal. So how passionate are we about in determining the prioritizations of what we're trying to accomplish? Like, how much income do we need to supplement?
Right.
Understanding what those real dynamics are, and that's kind of the art form of what I think is so interesting with working with clients. So the methodology of how you go about doing it, the science behind the math and math behind the investment strategies that we deploy. There's some very good, talented people that we work with. I mean, we work with some, amazing money managers that do some amazing work for us, right? I mean, they manage big, portfolios, but it's, at the end of the day, they're a segment of the total plan that we're trying to create. What I really want to focus on is kind of what does that total plan look like, so that we're making sure that we accomplish not some benchmark relative that's arbitrary and nobody gives a crap about.
I think this is important because this next section is something that a lot of clients do. In this section, Kim, in her conversation with me, basically tells me that she understands all the things that I just communicated, and that she understands risk.
I'm looking for a fit, and I'm looking for options, and I guess that's where I am, and I kind of appreciate what you're saying in terms of taking a harder look at what we're playing with here, and what could be the case, and I understand the concept of the risk, and I definitely don't want to put all this capital towards something that is a super risky endeavor. It's not just found money that I wanted a casino that I'm happy to lose just as happily as I gained it, but I also don't want it just to sit in some long-term mutual fund either. I want to be able to have that live off of it, in a sense, really, if it comes down to that.
Well, we can create balance between those things, and then you don't have to take on great amounts of risk to accomplish, relatively good returns. But the returns need to be based upon what we're trying to accomplish, not necessarily just some arbitrary number. But why? Because the truth is that, if you sit here and say, I just want 10%, then it's like, then you may take on risk in areas that you don't need to, we might have taken on a little bit too much risk then. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because the portfolio wasn't designed to do that. It wasn't designed to hit 14.6% return. And they're like, well, what was it designed to do? It's like, we agreed to 8.6 or something along those lines, or whatever it was. So, but the truth is that there'll be times when it's down, and there'll be times when it'll be up, and there'll be, and it may even out. Like when we sit here and say it's 8% return and it's supposed to get, nobody ever really hits that number of 8.0000% return. It's always going to be wiggle room on either side. So
what is interesting about this next section of the recording is that, and how it relates to discovery so far for me, is that when I went through the discovery, I read a lot of this perception of Steve Peters as this sales guy who's willing to say and do anything to get revenue, money. And so as it relates to this next section, you actually hear me tell Kim that when it comes to decision making around an advisor and the criteria, I actually explained to her that I would lack objectivity and independence, and there would be no way that I could rationally advise her without creating a conflict of interest and assisting her in determining, what her criteria should be in the selection of an advisor and what that selection process should look like. So it's a little bit counter, obviously, to some of the things that I have read in Discovery. Take a listen.
Through this, but obviously there's a lack of independence and objectivity if I'm helping you through this, meaning I certainly help you through it, but there's things that I'll be pointing out, but obviously the way I'm pointing them out is I'm pointing them out because it's obviously that's the way we do things, right? So you need to know there's some certain level of independence and objectivity that will be lacking as we go through it. But my thought is criteria, what are you really looking for? What's your criteria?
Now, obviously, this isn't the complete, you're only getting sections of the conversation that took place on May 19th, but I am going to end this call on May 19th. In this last section, I really explain the value-based wealth management process that I go through with clients and how I work with clients, and that I hope that we will have the opportunity to do a face-to-face meeting to get to know each other as kind of our next step. So take a listen.
Yeah, let's look at it all.
Yeah, let's look at it all, because once I look at the resources in its entirety, I come back and go, Kim, you're not going to be able to accomplish all this stuff. Or why are you even working anymore? I could get this money to produce X amount of dollars a year. You're only going to live at a certain lifestyle. Are you sure you want to work still? Like, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know what it looks like until I understand what you're trying to accomplish. And so hopefully today, I know we've carved off an hour to talk about this, get close to that time. As from a service standpoint, I try to meet with my clients every quarter. And lots of advisors say that. I'm pretty strict on this. We have a segmenting kind of, all businesses segment in some form or fashion. And there are certain clients that will at least get a telephone call from us. There are certain clients that will, but somebody on our team is going to be having conversations with our clients every quarter. For our larger clients and early clients that come in, a lot of the times in the first year or so, we are meeting face-to-face or in person with a very structured format. And that very structured format normally, here's the things that we've accomplished so far, okay? Here's the things that are outstanding. And here's what we need to do to accomplish the things that are outstanding and move forward.
Now we're on to the May 30th in-person meeting that took place at Capitol Grill. And this whole meeting was designed as a get-to-know-you meeting. It was really designed to be more social, to put a name with a face, and really develop a relationship with Kim. And so it wasn't designed for me to collect a significant amount of data, although I'm always listening. Social. And I'm going to save you a little bit here listening to the recording from May 30th. The first 45 minutes of it literally was more social than anything. I mean, we discussed churches in North Carolina, books that we liked, our families. I talk about, and I think this was intentional. They sent Kim, who was a little blonde, and I think they were trying to, she was single, came into a lot of money. I think they thought maybe I potentially might hit on her, but instead, I actually talk about my family, my children, my wife. I even talk about the 5 love languages. I talk about North Carolina beaches and property that I've owned and places that I've been and some of my favorite beaches. And then I talk about the Costa Rican house. And at this point, when I talk about the Costa Rican house, it starts to transition a little bit to a discussion about Vision Quest Capital and how the investment was made in Costa Rica, or an investment actually made by Vision Quest Capital. Now, I'm going to talk more about the Costa Rican property investment in another recording, but you're going to hear about this. Also, I think the most relevant element of the May 30th conversation is that I actually do talk about Vision Quest Capital. I talk about it, and I talk about the regulators. I talk about what we've done up to this point. I never offer it to her. And what is interesting is that I describe Vision Quest Capital investment in its 8% promissory note, but I also discuss that this business may really have to change its dynamic since it's under the scrutiny of the SEC. And I'm actually anticipating that the SEC is going to break up or tell me to change the ownership structure in the near future. Now, that's not something that you're trying to proposition somebody to invest in while you're disclosing those types of things. But take a listen.
Two companies, Vision Quest Wealth Management, Vision Quest Capital. Vision Quest Capital is where I do all my M&A, more like compliance-wise going forward, is that on one end, wealth management side, I'm a fiduciary. On the other side, I'm actually, so fiduciary means you're looking out for your
For other people's money, or yeah.
And on the hedge fund side, you're
Right.
hedge fund, people are investing in you, and your job is to make money.
And they assume the risk.
And there's certain risk, right? So we have to figure that out long term, because we've had the SEC come in last August, September, and it's kind of like this whole fiduciary role is becoming more and more. And at some point, I think there's a possibility in this regulatory environment that they could break it up or force us to break it up
To break up the two companies.
because I own both, and so there's a conflict of interest.
Right.
Now, I disclose all that, and I've had conversations with my investors, because a lot of the investors that are on the outside of it are like, dude, I'm getting like an 8% annualized return, and I have for since 2009. So I'm not interested in.
Like, I don't want to talk to you.
I don't want. I don't want you telling me that you're going to try to break this off, right? But I have to be cautious of how we go forward. Described, right? But I charge no fees if somebody invests on the Vision Quest Capital side, 0 fees. I only make money on the big above and beyond that, so I'm using their capital to make a bigger return.
So you're okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you just you're sourcing capital for investments. Then that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. No,
So I
that's.
don't charge a fee.
So you don't charge. You shouldn't, because it's their money. Yeah. Right. That makes
and
sense.
I'm advising you on something that I'm going to make more money on, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
So you're soliciting capital for whatever project,
Correct.
and you give your investors prospectuses on
PPMs and
Yeah.
subscription agreements and stuff like that. So.
Now, the May 30th conversation at Capitol Grill, you heard just now that conversation about Vision Quest Capital. There is no other recording where I talk about Vision Quest Capital. The segment that you just heard was the most amount of information that I provided to her about Vision Quest Capital. And as you heard, at no point did I ever suggest that she should invest. And I will honestly tell you that up to this point, somebody with her level of sophistication, understanding what a family office is, and then me disclosing that there is regulatory scrutiny, I mean, we would have to say that investment then would be risky. And so the claim that I was, number one, promoting Vision Quest Capital, which we now know is a lie, and then on top of it saying that there was a guaranteed investment or that it was even low risk, even if they change it to low risk, that is just an inaccurate statement. From there, and because most of the recording was social, there was also other things that we discussed that was relevant to business. We discussed the industry's business models that I see, and what Vision Quest Wealth Management's business model is, and why I think it compares nicely to the industry as a whole. We talk about our business process being the value-based wealth management system, and how I walk clients through the discovery process all the way through execution. I talk about our dynamic service model. I talk about examples of investments and talk about levels of risk associated with investments, illiquid investments, liquid investments. I even talk about how important, now this is hilarious, that how clients have to be honest and they have to be transparent around their success and their goals and what they disclose to me, because how we deliver advice is directly correlated to the honesty and the sincereness of what the client's trying to accomplish. Now, I'm not dismissing that the items that I just discussed aren't important. And again, you should listen to the entire recording. But I think what's important is that the information that I just covered, and because the nature of the meeting on May 30th was designed as a get to know you, put a face with a name, all the information that I just provided to you was described at a 30,000 foot level. You know, here's what the industry looks like, and here's how Vision Quest operates. Here's what our dynamic service model looks like. And doesn't matter what the topic was, it was at a very, very high level. I never really dove into much detail. And so if I have any hopes whatsoever at all of keeping this video to around an hour, I'm going to move on to the audio of July 7th. I like July 7th recording probably the most because, candidly, this is the closest we're going to get to really, truly rendering advice. Now, I have seen some financial information from her. She provided me a false document, as I had articulated before, that had some financial information, no statements. I still felt as if I was very much in the discovery process, as you'll hear, but I was a little bit more equipped to answer some of her questions, and she continued to be pushy. You're going to see right here at the 3-minute mark a conversation that I have with her where she tries to get me to provide some specific advice. So, listen.
So, anyway, yeah, that's kind of where I am. And I really liked talking to you when was it? Gosh, it was a while ago. It was like the end of May, I think, about, you know, what putting that into some type of vehicle or security or whatever that can generate that dividend and that recurring income to contribute to this, you know, so that I don't have to. I mean, I don't know exactly what. I've never been in this situation before, and I'm not exactly sure what to do with it. So that's why I'm, you know, reaching out to a bunch of people to try to figure this all out for myself, which is, you know, the first time I've had to do that in a while. So
with all of that, I still stop and I kind of explain to her that we are following a process here, and that I'm not going to rush to execute. And one of my big things, and I think if my staff's honest, they've heard me say this a number of times, and clients as well. But one of the big things that I think that we see in our industry is that most firms rush to execute. They rush to their approach to deliver advice to clients. And so I don't. Listen.
Again, I want to go further in some of the things that are more important to you.
Yep.
And then from there I can render, if you kind of remember my process, I go kind of more through a discovery, and we're not quite through that in its entirety yet. And once we get through that, then what I'm going to be doing is I'm, in essence, going to be putting together a plan for you. And that plan, I don't like the word plan. I don't like the idea of, you know, sitting here saying it's like a financial plan, because I think we talked briefly about this, but, you know, it's kind of like my military days. You can put the best battle plan together, but the minute the bullets start flying and, in essence, you start living life, things change, right? So the truth is that I have found that with clients, you create kind of a body of motion in which we agree to at a high level strategically what we're trying to accomplish, and we get buy-in by all parties on that. That's the goal, and that's the measurement of success, and that's what we're working towards. Think about it just like in your business, right? You would want to come into the year not knowing what your, you know, goals are for the year, right? So I want to, part of the discovery is me understanding kind of what your goals are. And then just like you would at your work, right? If you think something's not realistic, or you're like, wow, you know, I appreciate what you're saying, but holy cow, I don't think that's going to be able to be accomplished, or it's going to be really challenging, or there's risk involved in these things, then we can certainly you know, address those elements as we go forward with it. So
now, I also said that I thought that this audio was probably the one in which I came the closest to really rendering advice. And with that, I don't think you can be in a conversation with a client in the early stages and not give them some thought. So I do. With that, I provide her some of my thoughts, and I even give her a disclaimer that, I have not connected with other team members. And this is only one person talking, and so we're not at the point right now where you should be, considering this concrete advice. Listen.
Being said, my gut reaction, if I'm in, at a high level, and this is not me talking to my team about anything yet at this given stage, so, it's one person speaking, right? And that's not the best way to handle this, so you have to take it for what it's worth. My viewpoint would be that I would be taking a good portion of what you spend in a year, and that actually would remain in cash. Okay, that would remain in cash, and that would remain liquid because we don't know what we don't know yet. Until you get down here, until we start to see what things look like, I think that there's a certain level of liquidity that I think you should just have, whether or not that's stuff that you put in an account that we're managing or whether or not you put it in, like you said, a bank account that you're holding. I believe that having that kind of emergency reserves and that cash is smart for you in the first 12 months. We can always make adjustments after that, but I think that knowing what the spending habits are right now, I would sit here and say, take $8,000 times that by 12 months or something along those lines, and that would definitely be staying in cash, maybe even more, right? I mean, and again, maybe at a minimum, that I would tell you that my gut reaction would be to do that.
Okay.
The other once you do that, you're sitting here and you're basically looking at it, going, okay, well, I got I need to have $110,000, something like that, sitting in cash. I got $1.9 million. Let's just say I put $1.7 million, $1.6 million to work. I was even conservative and put like $1.5 million in the beginning when I was looking at things, not knowing that if we're going to buy houses, not all other stuff. And then sat down and said, what is legit amount? Like, what do I need to get in actual return to produce the income that we need to produce?
Right.
And it's doable, right? Like when you look at it, the number that you have there, I can sit there and say, I mean, you're in the 6 to 7% annualized return on that money that you need to get, and it needs to be able to produce, be able to live off of it. Now, with that being said, here's where the rubber meets the road now, right? I mean, if my returns are designed to make your lifestyle, this is where my first concern would come in. If my returns are designed to sit here and say, hey, Steve, I got $1.9 million, I want it to help me with my lifestyle because there's a certain lifestyle I want to live, and I want to continue to live that, and I'm going to live it for a while now, right? And that's what I want to do, and I need you to get this return for me, and so that I can supplement my lifestyle. That's fine. I can do that, and I think that that's very doable. I think the challenge is when you got competing priorities, when you sit there and you say, hey, Steve, I want that lifestyle thing that we're talking about, but I also want you to grow it so that each year it's growing at 10% a year, right? Mm-hmm. So my 1.9 is going to turn into, 2.1 or 2.2 in the next, the next year or so. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to sit here and turn to you and tell you, hey, Kim, that's up to you. Here's a guy that's got, an investment banking arm. I can show you a lot of things that you could do to produce high returns, but that's high risk, right?
Now, this next section, and actually probably the next two sections, is where I think we really kind of destroy Agent Harding's statements with inside the affidavit. Clearly, I am talking about BDCs, business development companies. I must have said it like at least 3 or 4 times. I never mentioned Vision Quest Capital. And although Vision Quest Capital and BDCs could maybe be classified in the same category as alternative investment classes, they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, we're not even talking about the same game, really. And so you're hearing right now Peters and Kim, this undercover agent, interacting around information regarding BDCs, not Vision Quest Capital.
Different types of sources of income coming in. you also want to diversify the strategy, and you don't want it to just be in one thing. So I can sit here and turn to you and tell you, hey, I can put you at a BDC tomorrow that kicks off. And by the way, we charge no commission. So if you do anything like where you're looking like, the New York guys that like getting into BDCs and they charge crazy commissions.
Yeah.
We're fee-based. We're a fee-based advisory shop. So we take no commissions, and anything that would have been commission-based means that the client just gets more, more shares that they buy, right? Because we don't do commission. We do it purely off the fee.
You don't take the commission out of it, so you just like $100.
So it just rolls in.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. But BDCs, when we put them in there, there's plenty of them that I can sit here and turn to you and they get you. Depending on what we put in, somewhere between 6.5% and 8.5%, and that's once we put it in, it's locked, right? I mean, and you can reinvest those, and then you can have it grow, which some clients do, right? Or they take the income and they take it on a quarterly basis, and they take that income out. And the only problem with BDCs, which isn't a real issue, because again, this is why you wouldn't put it all on one thing, is the liquidity is on a quarterly basis, meaning like most. And again, it sounds like I'm talking to you a little bit more sophisticated because I think that your background and what you have makes you a little bit more knowledgeable. But there's a time period that comes at the end of every quarter where you have the ability to liquidate that out at that given stage, right? And so, and that's why you get premium pricing, right? Like you get a higher rate of return because you're giving up liquidity. Now, you wouldn't put all your money in that, because if we needed liquidity, right? Like if I sat here and said, hey, we need an 8% return, and I could go get an 8% return. Well, see, why don't we just put it all in one thing? Because it's just not smart, right? I mean, it's not smart diversification-wise. It's not smart in the context of liquidity. It's not smart for a lot of different reasons. But when I sit here and say, hey, don't worry, you need to get a 7% return, and I can get that for you. I know that there's multiple ways that I can get that sources, and BDCs pay off as if it's an income as well. I reached out to one of my managers last night when I got your thing, and a guy who really manages non-qualified money for us for taxes, and I said, all right, I want to know if I got $1.5 million in right now, what would your strategy be? Now, I'm not going to go 100% with his strategy, but I want to see what he's going to come back with so that I can complement it with the other things that I'm thinking about right now, right, to produce the return.
Again, what you're hearing here is information that Special Agent Harding refers to because you're hearing things like BlackRock, but it also proves that his statements in the affidavit are a lie. At no point do I mention Vision Quest Capital. In fact, I'm talking about BDC still. So listen.
Oh, thank you.
Good. Good.
Wait,
well, I don't think you're...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, remind me what that BDC was, because you told me when we met. It's like a fund.
Business development companies. You invest in them. There's all kinds of different ones out there, from CNL to Franklin Square to a bunch of different. They're basically money managers who. And here's how it works, just to give you an idea. They lend money to mid-sized companies, like I give you an example, Toys R Us, right? And normally, example of Toys R Us would be a really good one because they're not grade A in the grand scheme of things companies, like when you're looking at it lending side, but they're big, substantial companies. And what they do is they lend money out. They, BlackRock has operators behind them, okay, and they have a foreclosure ratio of like about 3 or 4%. That's it, right? Like so, and there's a side of them that kind of hopes that they get more than that because they have good operators in the things that they invest in. So if somebody defaults, they come in and take over the company, right? And they'll normally make more money on that aspect of it. But what they do is they borrow money from investors to make these types of loans, and they loan them out, to you at 6 and 8%. They, on the other side, will yield spread it out where they're making 10, 12%, and then have warrants and options and a whole bunch of other things that are associated with it, board seats, income, other ways to produce income off of it, and that's how they make their money. But but I get it. I mean, and it's like you just got to manage the emotions of all those things. So, but we're good.
Like, I would
we're good.
feel better if I knew that. Okay, like that now the money's in whatever like a BDC or something, and I'm getting
something that's saying, oh, you will get whatever, locked in percentage, and okay, then I feel better about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is like that, like you said, it's like quarterly. So I mean, if things change, I know it's not liquid, but it could be liquid, right? Like at some point. So
yeah, it's liquid every quarter. It's liquid every quarter. So I don't want to. Yeah, and private debt, if you go into that, is not illiquid. Is not liquid at all. So those are the risks associated with it. But normally, private debt is higher return, right? Like so.
EDCs, like that's essentially what the money's going towards, is like these like companies like BlackRock buying someone's like debt, right? Or
correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, like a distressed debt.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you call that? Something like that. Yeah. I know they're kind of notorious.
It's hard not to, because they are a very big company, and very reputable, and very good at what they do, right? Like So, are they the only ones we work that kind of play in that space? No. Like I said before, there's plenty of other companies that we work with too as well. And it really goes on to what they're doing at that particular time, because they release certain funds at various stages. We get sometimes there's things like what they call founders funds where we get bigger rates of returns and all kinds of different things. So, it really depends on what's going on that drives the decision of what we go into. With that being said, I think we've intellectually talked a lot about, what we could do with the investments, and hopefully that's given you some comfort. I, again, would like to kind of turn my attention to more you specifically, if that's okay.
I'm actually going back now into the audio because I captured or remembered a section of it that I wanted to capture. And this is a section where I actually start to disclose to Kim risk. And I'm utilizing her ex-boyfriend, who is a so-called hedge fund manager that she's lived with for the last decade, and that's why she has a certain level of working knowledge about the financial service industry. And so I take her, or I start to talk to her about the risk of private investments in general, and that there is no guarantee and that they are risky. Take a listen.
But
no, it's not a strange scenario. It's just, here are the things that are unexpected outside of managing your expectations on what real return should look like, right? Because again, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but if I'm sitting with my ex, and my ex is talking about all the private equity deals that he's made and how much money he's making and stuff like that, that's awesome, and we all do in private equity if we're good at what we do. But we have short-term memories of the deals. So we sit here and we make that kind of money because we have this one huge home run that kills it, right? And we make 300% return. And then we don't talk about the three prior to that failed, right? Anybody who sits here and says, I only win all the time, I think that's bullshit, right? I don't know how else to say it other than that. It just is, right? So we're in a scenario right now that if your scenario that you just gave me is legit, right? That's all you need. Mm-hmm. There's no reason for me to take on more risk right now. And again, because all I've heard is, Steve, there's a certain lifestyle that I want to live. This money is designed to make sure that my lifestyle is maintained. Can you do that? Hell yeah.
Now, again, I think that you should listen to all of the July 7th recording. I'm trying to give you the clips that I think are most relevant, but lastly, we have the opportunity, since she came to our firm as an estate planning kind of asset protection prospect, I share with her a little bit about the estate planning process, and so I share with her how I handle or how I work with attorneys and how I handle the estate planning process. And so, well, this isn't necessarily, I think, relevant 100% to our case. I wanted to add this section of the audio recording.
Like a revised will, so that.
Were you doing it with a North Carolina attorney?
No, I'm just doing it with someone up here, actually in Greenwich, Connecticut. Is that why? Is that something I should change?
Yeah, you should stop, because it's not going to be. Does he know that you're moving to North Carolina?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has to be licensed in North Carolina, or they'll become obsolete once you live here. So you'll waste money. Yeah, you'll waste money doing that. So
well, it's his estate lawyer. That's probably why. So okay. Well.
Yeah. I can work with you on our firm can quarterback this, or I can refer it to you, refer you to an attorney down here that you can go talk to. I mean, normally we sit down with clients and we go through it and help them kind of get to the point so that it doesn't, cost them a significant amount of money to go with the attorney, right? Because the attorney is going to be billing out an hourly rate to get through some of the questions. Well, what I normally do is I can't draft it because I'm not licensed. I'm not an attorney myself. Mm-hmm. We have attorneys that we put on retainer fee at our firm, and then they do that for our clients, and they do it at a discounted rate. And then what we normally do is we do the discovery with the clients to walk them through, like, okay, so who would be your executor? Who would be your trustee if there is a need for a trustee? We go through those things with the clients and get them to the point where we know what they're looking for, and then we go to the attorney and we have them draft the documents, and then we present them to clients, and then they go and they do it. And it normally saves them some money by going down that path. If you would prefer to work directly with the attorney yourself, I can give you 2 or 3 attorneys that I recommend, and certainly, I would recommend Alex Atchison, who's my attorney, who did my own estate plan, right? Like, so there would be I could say, here's 3 people that you can go in and meet with, but I would also tell you, here's who I'd recommend, because obviously that's who I had to do my own estate plan, right? Like, so I'm not going to recommend somebody that I wouldn't use myself.
This concludes the video on the undercover agent or employee that the FBI utilized to collect information in my conversations over about a 45-day period. But I think the most important thing that this video does is it proves 2 things. Number one, it proves that, and I know this sounds incredibly harsh, but Special Agent Harding lied on his affidavit. I mean, at no point do I ever say in any of these 3 recordings that I am attempting to raise additional capital, that I offer this undercover agent Vision Quest Capital promissory notes as a potential investment to invest in. And I certainly don't talk about guaranteeing any investment. In fact, when I talk about risk and reward, I think that I was very clear about the risk associated with private investments and alternative investments. I think another byproduct that I think is, as I had articulated before, is that I think that what you hear in these audios is that actually Peters, I am carrying out the fiduciary duties of an advisor with a client. And it is true, every client's unique and every conversation's unique and different. But I genuinely think that when you listen to this, and primarily because I'm a very systems-driven guy, that this is very similar to the approach that I take early on with all clients. And so I think it does go a long way in demonstrating my fiduciary duties and the approach that I took with clients.